Ne jana go wo wo be ha den ste. Ne jana go den go be ha den ste. Hey yana hey 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 yana. Ne jana go wo wo yours quake.
What awołí means to me is that it is up to me to get the job done and to do my best.
What awołí means to me is to be strong in your decision making and to have the strength and courage to do what you need to do.
Akondashi ajabe she'ina ish'ot koholish akodit awallabe ha'ish'oliya chetat no joe altsab belganik chobe khishna awalla no yega alla en leche nina halongat oliya baakonsen lelchinda والخارج كيتعيش ولا به شياجة إن الخا هذا بقول جن بجنو جو خد الساد ولا نني خد باكنسن يا نعم
Welcome back, everybody, to our programming, Ta'awuthepe. We are once again joining you guys live on our Facebook live page from the Navajo Cultural Arts. We are a program from Diné College. We are joining you today with Master Silversmith Lyndon Tsosie, who is going to be joining us and talking to us a lot about the challenges and the successes that he has had in not only just in the world of silversmithing, but in the business world as well, that he works with and engaging with different types of Navajo artisans. So we wanted to thank everybody for joining us, and I will go ahead and now introduce Mr. Lyndon Tsosie. I met Lyndon, a couple years ago through one of our individuals that we collaborated with, Ms. Sarah Sinclair, who frequently works with Lyndon, and we were looking for a workshop leader, somebody we were just getting the program up and started, and for most people who follow us know that we offer weekend workshops. And we were talking to Sarah, and we said, Sarah, do you know of anybody who has a tremendous amount of not only knowledge and skill and ability to work with people, but who's just got great personalities and awesome vibe? And without even a moment's hesitation, she said, I know exactly who to hook you up with. You need to talk to Lyndon Tsosie. And I said, who's this Lyndon Tsosie guy? And she said, you don't know who Lyndon is? And she says, well, once you meet him, you won't forget him. So that was my introduction to Lyndon, and he came out, and man, he did a wonderful stamped pendant workshop with our students, and it inspired quite a few of them that we had out of those individuals that joined us. I believe we have 3 of them that enrolled directly into our Navajo Cultural Arts Certificate program here at the college, and 2 of whom have now transitioned into our BFA program at the college. So I wanted to introduce Lyndon by letting you know he is an amazing guy, an amazing silversmith, but most importantly, he is 100% about giving back to his community, and so we appreciate everything that he has done, not for our program, but for the individuals that we have seen come through our doors. So without further ado, I'm going to turn the screen over to Mr. Lyndon Tsosie so that he can talk to us a little bit about his experiences as a silversmith and ups and downs and challenges that he has faced in earning success. And so Lyndon, I will let you take over.
Howdy, Yat A. Welcome to the Navajo Cultural Arts Program's series here. Let me introduce myself, my clan. My first 2 clans are Klashchi and Nanishtashinatachimi. With my other 2 clans are Bitterwater and the Yucca Strung Out clan. And I'm glad that I was invited to speak today. Thank you a lot, Christine and Crystal and the Navajo Cultural Arts Program. I appreciate it. So what will we be talking about?
What kind of questions do we have for Lyndon? That's the
Yeah.
some of the
And real quick,
take it away.
I know you said he's about 100% in giving back. Well, I kind of got to take that back. I'm 99.8%. I'm still human and I still love things. So, you know,
Nope,
other than that, I'm good.
I guess if you could talk a little bit about the how you got into silversmithing to begin with.
Okay. So the beginning of my career, it all started in 1990, around 1980 actually it started, and I needed a job. My mother told me it was time to leave the nest, so I had a friend who worked at this place called Custom K Manufacturing, and she didn't know that I didn't know jewelry. I just said, yeah, I know jewelry. I can do it, you know. Although I did take a silversmithing class in high school, but I never really learned anything. And I did that. She hired me, and that's how I started the learning process of stamping. So my first learning experience in jewelry making was in a production company where I stamped, and that's all I did. And they gave me, you know, a pre-cut material, silver, and they gave me certain stamps and a Xerox copy of a design. So what I did is I measured it, I put down the lines, and I copied whatever was on the Xerox paper, whether it was a bracelet, a barrette. I think those earrings, so those were the main three items that I created. And I would do anywhere from 10 to 50 types of the same design, you know. And then every week I would get paid. So that's what I did. And I did that for about 6 months. You know, from there, I learning that process, you know, for me, it wasn't really about having this as a career. I never thought that in my wildest dreams that I would make a career out of silversmithing. I just needed a job just to mainly party, you know, because I was drinking a lot, and that's all my brain thought about was, okay, Friday night's coming up and oh, I'm going to party, but I need money. So I ended up getting this job. And I think sitting there, you know, and watching the owner and seeing what he had. So every morning I would come in and I would, you know, he would bring a different vehicle during the week. And I would watch him, and there were about 80 or 90 employees he had. So there was a production company of stampers, solderers, buffers, stone setters, and designers. So I would sit there and I would watch him in and out, and started to figure out who he was, and, you know, learn more about what he did in the business part. And I was mainly interested in that. I wasn't really interested in working. I'm lazy. And he so I started thinking, well, how did this guy get what he has? You know, he had a plane, he had a big house south of Gallup, you know, and he had several vehicles, and he was married. He was a white guy, and he was married to this Navajo lady, and, you know, he had all the trappings of success. And here I was, a 21-year-old kid with nothing, you know, and I was making $3.25 an hour. And out of the 90 employees, I was the only one that did not ever get a raise. I think I worked there for about 6 months. And, you know, if I were the boss and I saw a person like me, I probably wouldn't have given him a raise too, you know. And so I thought, well, this dude has how did he get that? You know, it wasn't him physically working on the pieces. He was making money selling the pieces. So I eventually left. I just stopped. I never went back. You know, I just one day woke up and said, I'm not going to work, and was out of work for a couple weeks. And after that, I found the guy who I went to school with, and he had a production company too, and he was a Navajo dude, and the production company was called It's City's Contemporary Arts, and it was right across from the old IJS building on Cole Avenue. So I worked there maybe 4 or 5 months, and he was he wasn't may he rest in peace, but he, you know, I would make pieces, and he ended up, you know, ripping me off. If I were to make 50 pairs of earrings and he were to sell them at $8, we as workers would get half of them. But I didn't know that until I made this giant order, and he ended up taking, I think, $2.50. So I got like $2 or $2.50 maybe. I don't know what it was, but I got way less. So after 4 months there, I just left, and I started buying tools and buying a little bit of silver with what he paid me, and eventually I ended up making 20 pairs of earrings. And then I went to Alzuni on the east side, and I walked there from downtown Gallup down to the west side of Gallup, and I sold my 20 pairs of earrings for $4. You know, that was the first time I ever did any type of selling, you know. And I thought, oh wow, this is how it works, huh? So I went and I would buy silver, and eventually I started selling different types of work, whether it was rings, bracelets, earrings, and then I started eventually going to different stores around Gallup and in Albuquerque. And that's basically how I started my career, you know. And it wasn't until I think 1991 or 92. It happened so fast, but it seemed like, you know, from the time I started making jewelry to the time I went on my own, it seemed like it was years. But I think it was like a year and a half when going to my first silversmithing job to being on my own, and then eventually finding out this is what I wanted to do. I wanted to be famous. You know, that was what was inside my head, was I want to be famous. How do I become famous? And my thought process was, if I can only get a photo of my work in the New Mexico magazine, I will be famous. You know, it doesn't work that way. And, you know, 30 years later, this is where I'm at now. But, you know, within that 30-year realm, I started, you know, again, doing a lot of wholesaling. I would go to Santa Fe, Albuquerque, and I lived in Albuquerque. I moved to Albuquerque about 1991, the fall of 91, with my ex-wife and my newborn. And we lived at the UNM family housing. So in order to pay the rent and the food, I would make jewelry while she went to school at UNM. And from there, I started to do a lot of wholesaling, you know, and that's mainly what I did. But I also was drinking really bad in the process of that. And I stayed there about 2 years, maybe a year and a half too. And then I eventually, I and my ex-wife ended up splitting, and I took my daughter and we moved to mini farms. And from there I was still wholesaling, but between 91 and the time I left to mini farms, I met approximately 4 or 5 people that directed me to a gentleman I would eventually meet in 1995 in Chinle. So from 91 through 95, it was a lot of wholesaling and just partying away and buying material, making work, and trying to be famous. That was my goal, was to become well known, and through all the trials and tribulations of my career, at my early start of my career, I was, getting into the dope and the alcohol, so there were, like I said, when I moved to Albuquerque, I ended up meeting my neighbor who lives in Washington State, and he became a really, really good friend of mine. And we're still friends, and his name is Robert Klein. And from there, Robert introduced me to another gentleman who is a friend of mine as well. And, his name is Dan Simplicio. And at that time, I had no idea, no inclination that this gentleman came from a very, very well-known jewelry family, and his father was Dan Simplicio Sr., one of the Zuni masters at that time. And, his work is sought after now. They were both at UNM, and we became really good friends. And, in that process, Dan introduced me to his nephew, who is Michael Coble, another fantastic Zuni fetish carver. And we became friends, we became like brothers, and we partied a lot. That's all we did, was party and do things like that, and make work and go sell it. We'd all get in a ride and go from one end of Albuquerque to the other end, and see if we could sell our work. And that was Mike and I that would do that, because he would sell fetish carvings. If I didn't sell anything, he would sell something, and then we go get drunk, or vice versa. And around that time, Michael introduced me to a gentleman in New York by the name of Jerry Spiegel, who eventually became my representative in New York in his gallery called Indians on Columbus. And at that time, around 90, 91, around early 92, I started to design stuff. It wasn't really production stuff. I got into the inlay, and I really started just trying to hone my skills at inlaying. I didn't have the tools for it, but what had happened is I would buy certain material from Thunderbird or Indian Jeweler Supply in Albuquerque, and I would ask the workers in Albuquerque, how would you cut this, or how would you shine a stone? So they gave me the details on what I needed, So basically, I really can say I'm self-taught. I mean, they gave me, information on how to do these things. And from there, it was all trial and error. I didn't have a saw blade to cut the material, so I'd buy these tiny rocks, whether it was lapis or coral or turquoise. Imagine those pieces that they used to sell are now worth thousands of dollars, And at that time, they weren't really worth a great deal, but they were exquisite AAA pieces, in rough. And what I would do is I would convert my buffing machine, and I would put a rock wheel on it, and I would grind these nuggets into little squares. So I would waste about 3/4 of that material, you know. And at that time I didn't know, you know, and I would put them in there and I would try to shine them, and I was using my buffing machine. So that, you know, they would tell me, well, you need this leather wheel to shine the stones. So they would give me sapphire powder, and I would dip these little chamois wheels in the sapphire powder with water, and then I would pop them on the buffing machine. Don't ever do that, because you know, you don't see the electrical wires in the back of the fan that are actually open. And you know, I was lucky I never got shocked by getting these wheels wet and that water shooting in the back of the buffing machine. You know, it's so stupid, but I didn't realize that. And Michael, being a fetish carver, he had a couple grinding machines. So one day I had bought this really, and at that time, you know, you had the home stereo systems, Sony, Pioneer, with the separate players, the LP, the CD player, the cassette deck, the receiver with the giant speakers. And I actually got that at Rent-A-Center, I think, and I was paying weekly on that, you know. So it took me about a year, and I finally paid this off. The day we paid it off, I was drinking with Mike, and we got drunk, and I was super happy because I had paid this off. I think it was like $1,500 plus the whatever finance they charged me. And we ended up walking to his place where he was staying a couple blocks from our apartment. And in the garage, there was this old dinosaur grinding machine. And I started messing with it. And I remember it like yesterday, you know, and I ended up falling in love with this machine. And I told him, I will trade you my new stereo system for this machine. So he said, okay. So we went back. We packed up the machine, the stereo system. He took it home. I walked back with this old grinding machine. The grinding machine I still use today. That has that, you know, and I don't ever regret that trade, because that machine still pays my bills, you know. And that was man, 91 or 90, no, 92, in the summer of 92. And that's when I really started to do inlay work, you know, and design stuff. He eventually, like I said, introduced me to Jerry Spiegel, who used to own Indians on Columbus, and who became my gallery representative in the middle part of the 90s. And he eventually, when I moved to mini farms where I started to live, and part of my lineage comes from the Chinle Valley Store area, mini farms area. So I have a lot of family on my father's side who come from there. And when I was a kid, I lived out there, and then I moved back when I left Albuquerque. My daughter and I, we packed up and we left. We had to leave the city because I knew I would kill myself drinking if I stayed, and if I stayed in my marriage, you know. And it was, you know, it was out of irresponsibility on my part, because I had a drinking problem. And eventually I moved to mini farms, and I stayed with my father, who lived out there. And once that happened, you know, I started to meet I started to meet, well, I didn't meet a whole lot of people, you know. I stayed to myself. But during that time, you know, I met Jerry Spiegel. And Jerry became a really, really good friend of mine. And, you know, the dude really cared about me. And he eventually drove 2,500 miles from Manhattan all the way to Mini Farm. And he picked me up. This part is always emotional for me to go back in time. You know, he went out of his way and he picked me up. You know, he knocked on our door and I opened it and it was Jerry Spiegel, this big Jewish man who was standing outside in Mini Farms in front of my door. And hold on. You know, and we talked, and this was in April. Actually, it was 24 years ago this week that happened. And he drove me 15 minutes to Chinle. Yeah, I know it takes 15 minutes from Mini Farms to Chinle, and he drove there, and he took me to Teddy Draper's house behind the hospital. And that was the first time I met Ted. And, you know, I was sort of sat out there, and you know, I was waiting to leave because I was headed out to the Gathering of Nations. And Jerry came just in time because he bought some stuff, and I had maybe $800-900 he gave me for items that he bought. And I ended up, you know, not really paying attention to meeting Ted, although we talked, and all I wanted to do was leave to Albuquerque because it was the weekend, and it was like, okay, Jerry, come on, we got to get out. But he ended up talking to Ted, and I don't know what they talked about, but before we left, Ted had asked me if I needed a job or if I needed help. And I said, yeah, I do. Because by then I had no material, you know. And so Ted said, well, come Monday. This happened on Friday, I think, or Thursday. And he said, well, come back Monday and I'll have some stuff for you and you can help around here and, you know, inlay and do things like that. And I'm sorry, I had to burp there. Excuse me. And so after that, I left, you know, and Ted just said, yeah, come back. Good to meet you. Come back and you can start work. So I said, all right, cool. But really didn't pay attention to that. So I took off to Albuquerque, and I dropped off my daughter, and then she was with her mom for the weekend, and then I ended up just getting drunk, you know, during the weekend, and I literally blacked out where I don't remember the weekend, you know, and I think I came back on Tuesday. Yeah, back to Mini Farms on Tuesday. And I still had 2 cases of Budweiser Tall Boys. At that time, they didn't sell 18 packs or any, they just sold cases and 12 packs. And I had 2 cases of 16-ounce Budweiser cans. So I drank that whole week. I just drank that. Then I finally went back to Ted's the first week of May. And Ted, you know, if you know Ted, and you know when he's upset, you don't want to bother him. And he, you know, sort of ignored me, but he couldn't ignore me because I was there to work or to see him. And he just sort of said, oh, I thought you forgot and didn't want to come. So You know, you don't have to stay if you don't want. And I said, no, I'll stay. I'll help. So Ted gave me a project, a feather that he had made, and I inlaid it. And I think I got there about 10 a.m. and I did this. I inlaid this feather pendant or feather pin, and around noontime, he had called me into his office. So I turned the machines off and I sat down with him. And he just really started talking about who we were, where we come from, what we do, you know, as Navajo people. Things that I remember my grandmother and mother talking about, but not, you know, at that time, when my mother and my grandmother would talk about these things, it would go into my head and I would remember, but I really wouldn't look at it in a positive way. I think it just was something I remembered them talking about, you know. And when Ted solidified that information in me again, it was very profound. Even that it's like yesterday, you know. And it being, geez, 24 years ago this week, you know, that I didn't realize that, you know, what he talked about. I went home to many farms and my daughter was there. She had gotten back. I left Ted's about 5 p.m. and I got back to the house and my daughter was there with my dad, and I grabbed her and I just hugged her. And, you know, she's 30 now, and you know, I told her I'm changing my life. And, you know, that was, 24 years ago, you know, that I last drank. And, you know, it'll be May 2nd, I think, is my 24th year of not having any alcohol. And that's when I changed. That's when everything that was told to me through my grandmother and my mother, you know, just older people as I was growing up, and Ted, it all solidified in me. And my willpower to not drink and not do drugs, it solidified that day, you know, and I started to change. And that's when I really started to look at my career as a career and what I wanted to do as a businessman. You know, it was a lot of work. So, you know, people always ask about the story I just mentioned. You know, Ted, dear friend of mine, he's like my uncle. I still get nervous around him. Taught me a lot. He was my teacher, still is my teacher. You know, although we don't see each other a great deal, I love the guy and I respect the man. And, you know, he taught me about life. He didn't necessarily teach me the silversmithing techniques. What he taught me was much more than that, and that was life. You know, he taught me about life, and I always say I apprentice under him, and my apprenticeship under him was about life. You know, if he told me to go up to the roof and fix a leak, or if he told me to dump the trash or rake the yard, I did it. You know, if he told me to pick up rocks and put it 10 feet on this side just for the hell of it, I went and did it because I was learning life from Ted, you know. And a lot of what I do today, I owe a lot to Ted, but I also owe a lot to the other people who directed me to him, you know. Without these individuals, I would not have ever met Ted, and my life probably wouldn't have changed, and I wouldn't be here today, you know. So when that happened, everything everything in my own life changed, you know. And around that time, I started to do the food drives, you know, which I still do today. So that is basically the start of my career, you know. And I remember, you know, in Albuquerque doing my first inlay piece, which was a bracelet. Man, I was so proud of it. And I used my buffing machine and everything, and put it together. And then I went to my other neighbor's house, and they were all over there, people that made a guy, somebody McCabe, and he's very well known with making these coin bead necklaces, really beautiful. And at that time, he was doing that. And I went over there to show off this bracelet I did, my first inlay bracelet, and he looked at it and he was serious. He looked at it, he was just looking at it, going like this. He looked at me, and you know, and these were his exact words, so you could bleep this out if you want. But he looked at me and he said, "Were you fucked up when you made this?" You know, and I was so shocked because I wasn't. And it hurt, but I'm glad he said that, because it made me work harder to hone those inlay skills, you know. And that's what I tell a lot of artists nowadays. Don't, you know, don't get mad. Don't cry about it if somebody critiques your work and tells you the truth, because it'll only help you in the long run, you know. And that was one of my first negative critiques, but it really was a positive critique when I look at it, you know. It was like, well, F you then, you know. But eventually I thought, yeah, he is right. I need to work harder on it, you know. So that was part of my early existence in my career, you know. And there's a lot more to this, to my career, you know, getting into Indian market, getting into the Herd Museum, and eventually starting my own company, Jasmine Inc., and then eventually James and Tsosie Incorporated, along with the House of Stamps, the House of Tools, and the House of Lyndon, you know. So all those have combined with my illustrious career as a jeweler, you know, and honing my skills in what I do today. And not just as a jeweler, but also as a businessman, you know, having a couple little companies in Tokyo and Akita, Japan, you know, as well as our stamp company, where we sell handmade stamps to approximately 33 countries around the world, you know. And a lot of it has been trial and error, you know. So I guess you can ask me questions about the specifics of those entities if you want, because I don't really know where to start on what, I guess, the public and what anybody wants to hear. Because if I go on and on, we'll be here for 8 hours. Oh, shoot, I can't hear you. Hello?
Hello. I do that all the time. I did that in the last section. I always forget to unmute myself. So, and one of my friends, Sam Slater, when he was getting feedback from the first lecture, he was like, "Make sure you unmute yourself." Well, Sam, I didn't. So, so there you go. You know, Lyndon, it's really such a pleasure to hear the origins of where you came from, and I like the idea, the initial idea that you had, that, you know, I want to do it well because I want to become famous. I guess I have two questions based off of that. Like, what would you consider up to now, obviously, because I still consider your career as illustrious as it has been, very young. right? But up to now, what
Yeah.
would you consider, I guess, the pinnacle of your silversmithing career?
Well, the pinnacle, I don't know how to put that. I guess in financial terms, I guess I could say the pinnacle, like any artist, you know, you want to be able to sell pieces and garner the awards, and garner the price of what you've always thought your pieces are worth, or what the public thinks your pieces are worth. And doing that, like this year, last year, previous years, the price of different items that I have sold, really were great pinnacles of my career. And I know people think, well, money isn't important, money isn't it's the root of all evil. I think if you look at it that way, then it can become the root of all evil. If you look at it and respect it, it's just like anything. The more you make, the more the less worries you are able to have, which in turn gives you, I guess, more balance within yourself as a human being, in order to be balanced, in order to live right or to eat right. And when you eat right, and when and I'm sure we all don't eat right, but when we are balanced, we have a better understanding of how to do things, and perhaps we live longer, but we're not as worried about things. Being in this career, it's super, super hard. I always say I was one of the lucky ones. There are approximately 280,000 Navajos, and each of us knows someone who does some type of art, or who makes a living selling art. And unfortunately, 2/3 or more, don't make a true living off it in a comfortable sense. People are struggling, whether they're earls or just selling here and there. You have less than 2% who actually, and with Navajo artists, who actually make a true living off their art. Less than 2% out of the 280,000 Navajos. You have a lot of artists who have the name, but also may have a different career, and who have been working and garnering a paycheck from a different company and doing their artwork on the side, but they don't really talk about their career in that per se. So you do have that against you as a self-employed artist, who actually will make a very comfortable living, where you have an accountant, and you have perhaps a business manager, or you have somebody helping you with managing the finances that you have garnered in order to be comfortable. I mean, these things all come about as you grow into your career. Because as a individual who has to make money in order to pay their workers or whoever, it's just like any company. You go to work, the company pays you a check. You don't really think about where that money comes from. You automatically know, okay, I'm getting a check at the end of the week. But for me, and for a lot of businesses, we're the scope to figure out how to get that cash so we can dispense it to our employees, or our workers, or whoever. So the pinnacle is there's so many, you know, in a sense, for me, with trying to figure out, well, what is the pinnacle? You know, yes, we have, you know, I failed a lot in my businesses. I failed numerous times. And eventually, you know, if you keep working and you persevere, those failures will turn into successes. But most people don't see that. Most people don't see the failures and the struggles of getting there, you know. They only see the little success of what you have. And, you know, and I think then you have a lot of jealousy, you have a lot of animosity within your own people, you know, talking bad about one who is successful. Um, I don't really say I'm successful, because as you mentioned, Christine, that, you know, my career is so new in terms of the success of what we're doing, that we're very young, you know. And if we just keep going and keep persevering and pushing the envelope to do what we need to do, to become comfortable, then I will keep doing that, you know. And the pinnacle, and then there's, you know, the other pinnacles of that career is just like with the food drives we do, you know. Ted is the one that told me that. Ted is the one that told me, you know, eventually you're going to have to give back, because when we look at it, when we look at who we are as Navajo people and as individuals, that very word is something we, I guess, need to understand the actual meaning, you know, of helping one another and asking for help to help other people. You know, just like the GoFund drive I started, you know, for the COVID food drive. You know, it's just trying to get people to work together so we can help other people. And same with my food drive in 1995. You know, I think I'm very proud of that. I'm very proud that I was able to do that. And I think a lot of these things I do to give back just didn't pop up when I sobered up. When I was a kid, I remember doing that. I remember helping and just doing things, you know, even the business part of me, you know, when I had no money. And there were 7 of us. I had 6 siblings, my mother, my father, you know, and we, you know, with my friends and stuff, we would figure out, well, how can we go down to the Curio, the little store in Tohatchee, and buy a Coke and chips, you know. And we had no money, and we couldn't pick up cans because there was no place to dump the cans to get money unless we all go to Gallup. But we were kids. So what we would do is, you know, what I would do is I would knock on the teacherage doors or our neighbors in the BIA housing and ask if they would pay us if we cleaned their yard or washed their vehicles. And that's what we did, you know. And we would get a couple dollars and we'd be happy. We'd go straight to the Curio and buy a Coke and potato chips in the candy bar and go to the river right there, or the creek, and have a blast, you know. So that's part of that also goes back to the business part of what I do. You know, I remember doing that when I was a kid, but I also remember daydreaming a lot and and I had a shitload a load of Hot Wheel cars and matchboxes, you know, and I collected those. I have about 1,000 of them right now in my garage, boxed up, you know. And I would daydream. I would take those cars out. My mother would not buy me the cases. I would always see them on the commercials, you know. You could put the Hot Wheels in these cases, and they were really cool. And I could never get one. You know, she would always say, we got no money, you know, yet she would buy me at least one car a week I would buy. And so I would put him in these paper sacks, you know, and I probably had 5 or 6 paper sacks full of these cars, Hot Wheels and Matchboxes. And we lived in the BIA housing. My mother was a physician's assistant, so she worked at the clinic. She was our local doctor in Tohatchi. And what I would do in our yard is I would make these roads, and we had this giant yard, and it was grass. It was a grass yard. So I'd make these roads, and I would pretend I was in the mountains, because I you know, my grandmother has a cabin in Norbona Pass, and we would always go up there during the summers, and I still love going up there. And so I would daydream and get the best cars out of my collection, whether it was a Mercedes or Porsche, or, you know, and I would put them in one section, and I would make a lake, like an RV camp, you know, and I would build a little store, and I would say, this is my store, and people are coming over to buy from me. That's why I can have this Mercedes right here, you know, just in my head. And the daydreaming pushed me to work hard as an individual today, you know. Just a lot of that. And, you know, a lot of the giving back also came from my grandmother and my mother. You know, my mother was one of the first American Indians to become a physician's assistant in the United States in 1971 or 72 through the I think it was Nixon or Ford. I think it was Nixon who signed it when the courts were coming back from Vietnam, and they had this PA school. So they allowed 200 applicants of Native Americans to apply, and only 20 were picked. So my mother took the test, and at that time she was an RN. And she took this test, and she passed, and she was one of the 20 Native Americans around the country to go to this PA school. And, you know, we moved to Albuquerque. She went to UNM there and did all that, her clinicals and everything there. And you know, and life changed. I mean, life changed in a sense that, you know, my dad broke his back at that time, and became a paraplegic, and, you know, he was in a wheelchair for 38 years, and he passed away 12 years ago. And, you know, so my mother was the breadwinner. You know, she's the one that fed us, that was very strict, made us go to church, did all the American things that people do. And but I remember late at night, the clinic would close at 4:30, and at that time the Navajo Nation did not have the ambulance service going. There was no ambulances on the Navajo Nation at that time in the 70s. And I remember my mom would get off at 4:30, come back, and she'd cook dinner. There was 6 boys and 1 girl. And, you know, around between 8 and midnight sometimes, people would come to our house and knock on our door. And it would be community members, whether it was a Nosh Chitty or Mexican Springs, Twin Lakes, Tohatchi, and they would ask to see my mom because either their kids or they were sick and they couldn't get to Gallup. So she would get up, put her clothes back on, go to the clinic, and then she would become the doctor, the secretary, because she had to pull out the chart. She would become a X-ray technician, a blood technician, you know, she did a pharmacist, and she did this. And if somebody came at 8 in the evening, you know, she wouldn't come home till about 11 or midnight, you know, because everything wasn't, there was no computer at the time. So she would write everything down on the chart and make sure everything was correct, you know. So she did that a lot. And, you know, she gave back to her community like that. Even though she was off at 4:30, she still, you know, she could have easily have went to the door and told these people, go to Gallup, you know, and go get seen at the hospital. But no, she, you know, she got up and she did that. She went out of her way, and she always did that. You know, she's 80, she just turned 87 on Sunday. And I'm so proud of her, you know. So a lot of that, I think a lot of the giving back comes from that. But, you know, it extends further than that. My seventh great grandfather, my blood comes from Norbona. You know, my grandmother Jenny Scott always talked about Norbona and where we came from and how we acquired the grazing rights up in Norbona Pass, and how all that transpired. So that is, you know, I look back at that because I think back as, well, you know, they took everything from us when the Navajos went on the Long Walk, you know, and he was assassinated in 1849, approximately 18 years or give or take before the Long Walk. But it was his assassination that started that Long Walk process, you know. And he, you know, when you look back at the history of what he did as a Navajo, and how many people looked up to him, you know, and when his family or my family was taken away, they were literally left with nothing. I mean, all our families were left with nothing. And when we came back, we had nothing, our ancestors. So I look back as the pinnacle of what I do too. I always think back of about my seventh great grandfather, of what he had and what he did to his community members around his area, you know, where he was situated. He helped everybody from the oral stories that were told about him. And I look back and I say, well, you know, I'm the seventh generation. It's time somebody do the same thing, only in this modern age where we have this technology that we can ask people to help us so that we can help other people who truly need that help, you know. If anything ever happens where I may need help, I hope somebody will help my family, you know, and feed us if that ever comes into play, you know. And for us to do this also goes back to what my seventh great grandfather once did, you know, and that was all taken away from him and, you know, my family. So in terms of wealth, I hope I bring that back, not just for my family, but for my community and part of my Navajo people who truly need help, you know. Yeah, there's so many things we have done. I mean, you know, I know we also, and you know, not to brag or anything, but we've done quite a bit. You know, we even gave our high school, our mater, I'm looking for now, Tahachi High School, you know, $10,000 one year in scholarships, you know, because they needed it, you know, and hopefully those students have degrees. I have no idea, but maybe they do, you know, and I hope they do, and I hope they give back, you know. So the whole process of that, Christine, is it's not just one accolade. There's many in this story and my career.
I think that speaks a lot to, I mean, it definitely gives an understanding of how you have touched people's lives. At least from our program, I see how you have touched our
Uh,
students' lives and in our program, and how those individuals have then remodeled that, right? They've taken that
yeah,
initiative and okay, well, I'm not the end game here. There's further work to be done. And so we have a couple questions that are coming in. I know that we're
sure.
running short on time, so we're going to go ahead and
I
close
know we
down.
are. My battery just showed up as very low. So
And we started off with full. So I guess the two
yes.
questions that we have is the first one is, where do you find your inspiration? And then go ahead, we can start with that one. Where do you find your inspiration for your
Okay,
work?
boy, my inspiration is, as I've gotten older, I don't. How can I? And this is good. I hope it's not long, but my career as a jeweler, um, I've done a lot. I've achieved a lot of accolades and garnishing ribbons from the most prestigious art shows in the United States, which I'm very, very proud of. And um, oh, excuse me. So with that, it just the inspiration comes from that. Right now, the inspiration, I'm obsessed with ribbons. So at this point in time, I still want the ribbons, because I'm getting older and I'm 30 years in this career. And there are a lot of young jewelers out there who are great jewelers. And it's like, shit, they want to kick my ass, huh? So that inspires me to work harder, is to say, hey, I'm still capable of kicking your butt with a piece, it's not going to go through.
Awesome. And then I guess what would be the main piece of advice that you would offer up and coming silversmiths?
As a jeweler, just stay inspired, stay inspired with everything that surrounds you. Buy books, buy magazines, buy whatever you can buy or get, and be inspired not just by Navajo jewelry, but by everything, architectural designs, um, everything that is art, on a business level, the first thing you want to do is you want to be incorporated. Don't go into this business as a sole proprietor. If you want to be comfortable 20, 30 years down the road, get incorporated. That's the most important advice I can give you as a jeweler and a businessman and making art your career. Get incorporated.
Awesome. Well, before we go ahead and close off, when you hear the phrase "ta wotepe," what does that mean to you?
Man, there's a song from Bruce Springsteen, and it's our anthem song, because when we're down and out, I put that song on, and it says there's going to be hard times coming, there's going to be good times coming, but there's also going to be hard times coming. Swing that ball at me, because I'm going to grab it, and I'm going to work hard. I'm going to work as hard as I can to do what needs to be done. It's just being honest and upfront and working your butt off, grabbing the world. And I always tell people, the world isn't in the palm of your hands. If you are young and you have no kids, you have everything in the palm of your hands to be successful. Bring that wrecking ball on is all I can say. And that's what the word, is that.
Awesome.
Bring it on.
Well, Lyndon, we truly appreciate you sitting down with us and working in new interfaces like Zoom and Facebook Live
Oh,
to
yeah.
help reach our viewers. And so we wanted to stress to our viewers, everybody who's watching, that we do have a survey that we're going to be including on the link of this live video, as well as the recording that we'll be posting up on Instagram and on our YouTube page. And we have some incentives. That survey that we ask helps to keep programs like ours funded. So we submit those back to our funding agencies. And it also tells us how we can improve our projects from here on out. So we really appreciate your feedback. We will be leaving that survey open, that online survey open for 1 week. And Crystal Littleben, our program coordinator, will be joining me next Tuesday at 3 o'clock live. And we're going to be doing a raffle, actually 2 raffles. The first one will be for those individuals who completed a survey. And the second one is inspired by one of Lyndon's suggestions, is not only do you have to submit a survey, but you need to send to our program. You can DM it to us. You can send it via Facebook messaging. You can also email it to us at ncap@denecollege.edu, some sort of demonstration that you have donated to an organization that is helping out in helping Navajos specifically during this pandemic time. It's a great suggestion that we got from Lyndon, so we appreciate that. As prizes for individuals who submit surveys, you'll be automatically entered into a raffle for one of Crystal Littleben's Thunderbird pieces, which she actually learned by taking one of Lyndon's classes. So also stay tuned to Lyndon's page. He has great podcasts and radio interviews that he does with his group over there. And then if you're able to not only complete the survey, but also demonstrate that you have provided in some format to one of these organizations helping out our Navajo people during the coronavirus pandemic, you will be entered into a raffle for one of Lyndon's pendants. So we hope that
you guys got to look at that.
Yeah,
it's a really cool pendant.
And we'll get that up so that you guys can see this, as well as one of Lyndon's books. Lyndon has this book out, and that'll be accompanying the pendant as well. So we truly look forward to your feedback. We'll be coming back live in 2 weeks with Marlo Cantoni. He is a Navajo weaver. He's based out of Winslow. He's also won a tremendous prestige over at the Herd and over at SWAYA. And so that's what we have for you guys. Thanks, Lyndon, for joining us.
All right, real quick, Christy.
Yeah, no problem.
There is one organization you can give to, ours, the Don't Be a Norma GoFundMe. That money half of it has already gone to the Gallup Food Bank here, who are packing our food, and the Navajo Hopi Honor Riders Incorporated people will be delivering that, I think, on Friday. So our GoFund is still up. If you guys want to donate there, $5, $3, $1,000, whatever you want to donate. It all goes to the Gallup Food Bank here, and they will be dispensing the food to not just the Eastern Navajos, but as long as we can get food and bill that money, we can be able to feed whoever needs food. Okay? We appreciate it. Thank you.
Yep, no problem. And we'll include that link as well to Don't Be a Normal. And don't be a normal, guys. Stay inside. Yeah. Make sure that you guys stay healthy. For those of you guys who are under the weather or who are suffering, our thoughts and our prayers are with you. And just make sure that you guys take the time to take care of yourselves and the ones that are around you. Thanks, everybody. And we'll be seeing you in 2 weeks.
Nejana go wo be haden ste. Nejana go digin go be haden ste. Hey yana, hey yanga.